Okay. Well, let's see. I'll do the first. Start with the share screen. All right, let's go. Go ahead and get started. Twenty 21. On that. Close those. Close those. I'm on a Zoom. No problem. I'll catch up with you in a couple minutes. Should shut my door here. Sorry, Stuart. All right, let's see if we can share here. There we go. Can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. I'm going to start by just going over some stats. A week or so ago, I published the full year stats for 2020 compared to 2019. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to get some use out of these and send them to your customers. That's not really the one I wanted though. Hold on. Wrong year. Let's see here. Yeah. 2020, 2021. There we go. Okay. That should be up there. Sorry, guys, being my share screen is a little shaky today. There we go. Why does it keep saying 20? Oh, the file name's wrong. That's why. Well, let's see. Yay. Anyhow, I think it's worth sharing a few minutes on this slide here. So let me get the right slide up. There we go. This is 2021 compared to 2020. And I think it's good to look over a 1 year period just as well as you more people in there, just as well as we're looking. We always publish month over month, but at the end of every year, we take the 12-month average from the previous year and compare it. So it makes it a little bit more stable because we're taking 12 months worth of data rather than 1 month worth of data year to year. So the issue here is taking a look at what this graph is telling us. And we put these out every month so you can share them with your customers. And, you know, not everybody has the same view of our market, especially if they don't live here. So if you're working with a buyer, and of course, if you're working with a seller, the idea that behind these graphs is to try to give them some idea of what the market conditions are, so you can help set their expectations. Pricing, of course, is a major issue. Look at the median, the rate, the overall median price went up 21% in 2021 compared to 2020. That's a pretty big increase. We normally figure 8 to 10% per year is probably average appreciation. So when you see prices going up like this, it's just, some of it in 2020 was probably a revaluation of Naples a little bit, because a lot of people came down here during the pandemic and realized that we had pretty good value relative to other parts of the country. And so I think you got to take a look at this, and you got to acclimate people to the fact that we've had some really significant price increases over the last year. Go ahead, Mark.
So I'm a little confused. Why is the overall less than either the single family or the condos? Is it lots, or what is it that brings it below the 28 and the 36%?
Well, the way the data works is you're able to take all of the median price of all sales versus the median price of just single family homes and just condos. So
I would have thought the median would have been somewhere between 28 and 36%.
Well, the median price is looking at the overall median price of 2020 over 2021. So it's two different data sets.
Okay. All right.
And it will always be a little less because you're spreading it over 17,000 sales versus 7,900 or 9,000 down the lower right. So obviously in 17,000 sales, they're looking at the middle price in there, and it's right around 465. Now median is not average, so it's the middle price above which half are above and half are below. We use median because it's a little bit more stable in our market, although we publish the average in the media stats. It's just, if you get a $15 million sale and a $200,000 sale, the average tends to be skewed a little bit higher than the median, which says, okay, out of all the 17,000 sales, what was the middle sale? And that number has been steadily increasing over the last 2 or 3 years, from low threes to middle threes and now to middle fours. So obviously the lack of inventory is severely affecting that, plus new construction, which used to kind of be our buffer to try to make sure that we weren't trying to get a lot more for resale properties than new builds. There's just a very difficult time for new construction because of material shortages primarily.
The same question about the closed sales, that the number of units overall is up 26%. Condos is 15. I guess that makes sense. That one sort of falls right in the middle.
Right. Because again, it's looking at all the sales.
What does the 98.5% mean?
The year stats are a little bit better because they're more stable. Represent a 12-month moving data versus when we compare January to January. So, but the point is that look at days on market down 51%. We were pretty much our average days on market was in the 90s for many years, probably as many years since everything was in from 2012, 13 on, it was 90 to 95 pretty much steadily. So now we're half of that. And, really, and that's average. So you got some neighborhoods that have days on market in the 20s and days on market in the 50s and 60s, but they still aren't very long. Buyers need to be willing to make decisions much more quickly. And it's difficult to, you send people properties and they go, oh, I'm interested in that. Sorry, it's sold. So you kind of, it's almost like you have to manage your buyer a little bit differently in this market because of the how fast moving the inventory is. And, you know, the other thing that's important in this slide is over the year, we only took 6% new listings. So it wasn't like we didn't put listings in the top of the funnel. It was just, if you take a look, we took out quite a few more listings than we put back in. So that's what's happening, is it's gradually we're putting X in the funnel, which is, you know, not a whole lot different than we've done over past years, but we're taking a lot more out. So it means that there's a lot more demand than there is supply. And that's why we say listings are, you know, at a premium, because when they come on the market, there's quite a bit more demand than ever before for that same listing.
What does the 26% under closed sales mean?
26%. That would be, there was 26% more closed sales in 2021 than 2020.
So 2020 was maybe an off year.
Well, I think.
'Cause I don't know that, I mean, as somebody would say, looking back over 5 years, is 17,000 in line with previous years, or is it a sizable jump?
Well, let's look. I happen to bring up the 2020 results. So was trying to bring up the 2021. So let's look at that. Let me just drop this. Let's see. Let's see. Shrink this down. Screen sharing is paused. Stop share. New share. So that was 2020 compared to 2019. So you see, 2020 was 13,500, and then we went up another 20% over that to look at the difference. This is 2020 compared to 2019. Look at the days on market, median price. Look at the supply, 6 months supply. I didn't track new listings for that period of time, but that's where your numbers are increasing so much. Is it just the total number of sales? Now, 2021 was the best year we've had for overall sales since 2006. And you go back and look at it. So if I go back and go back to there we go. So you can see the numbers went up dramatically. That's where your increase came from. You went up 4,000 listings, which is 25%. So anyhow, that's where these numbers are coming from. They're pretty consistent in terms of what's happening month over month. But if you notice that the overall supply, you know, we're now quoting in January supply numbers under 1 month supply for January over January. But if you look at it over a 12-month period, you know, inventory is down 68%, but still there's still, you know, enough inventory out there to try to present some opportunities for buyers. But you can see dramatically 93 days to 46. Overall sales up 26%. We're still putting quite a few listings into the hopper. That's only down 6% from last year, but the consumption is so high. So I just put this out to give you something to share with your customers. It's a little more information than the neighbor chart. The neighbor chart excludes Marco Island, whereas we include all of Collier County, and the numbers are a little bit different than the neighbor charts that that, they started putting out a few years ago. So the other thing that I added to the top here and under closed sales was the average list to sell price. So the days of offering 85% and hoping for the best are pretty well gone. It's really, that's another thing to condition your buyers to the fact that in many cases, we have quite a few sales over the list price. So actually in January, I think a couple of those categories hit 100%. Share this with your customers. I think that if you could set up a smart plan or a campaign in command, like several of the agents have, and just replace this graphic every month and send it out, it's a great database tool. And I think I was talking to one of the agents who said he's doing it now as a campaign, an email campaign rather than a smart plan. And then he's able to measure who is opening it and what his open rate is. And he was telling me this morning that he gets about a 20% open rate when he sends this to his database, which is pretty huge. Okay, anybody have any comments or questions? Mark, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I assume that our market center is as good, if not better.
Yeah. I mean, based on what we did last year, for sure, because we had a lot of much higher end sales this year. So. Okay.
So I guess one of the things that people don't interpret maybe is when the median price goes up 21% or something like that, that doesn't mean that every home and every condo in every neighborhood went up 21%.
Correct. Remember,
so the sellers think, oh, my home's worth 21% more because I saw it in the Naples Daily News, and that may not necessarily be so.
Correct. So we can just take a quick look at Lee for. So this is Lee County 2020 compared to 2019. So obviously a more robust number of sales, but up only 12, 13%. So if I then stop that and I put in Lee for the same period, hopefully this will work. I do the. There we go. All right. So you can see the difference there. Not as quite as big a sales increase, but look at the days on market down to 32. Mark, and the median price is up. This is probably behaves a little more like you were thinking, Mark. The single family up. I think the problem with a lot of our single family numbers is they went sky high, especially in the higher price points. So that drove the median up quite a bit more than in Lee County, where the prices are a little bit, obviously a little lower overall. So you take a look at that. Again, we put in a pretty much equal number of listings from the prior year, but took out 20% more in pendings. So again, the effect wasn't quite as strong as Collier, as you can take a look. You put 29,000 listings in and you took 29,000 listings out. So it was a little bit more balanced in terms of what went in the top versus what was sold. And again, the sales numbers reflect in that, up 19%, up 15% for single family, and up 26%. So obviously the difference in the Lee County results and the Lee County demographics are quite a bit different than Collier. And, they don't have anywhere near as much high-end luxury sales. They have some, but those have a tendency to drive the median up a little bit more by virtue of what happened in Collier. So again, now this is something, if you have your buyers looking in Lee County, great idea to send it to them and keep them up to date on a monthly basis. I don't know whether you want to look at the January numbers real quick, but we can do it. Let's look at Collier, January 22. So again, this is Collier January 22 compared to January 21. And the results are even more dramatic. But take a look at what's happening to sales. Remember, we were up. Now we're down 29% over January of last year. So the effects of the inventory are starting to impact overall sales. So we, generally the pundits and the people that I talk to that are, in our media relations meeting at NABOR are saying that 2022 is probably not going to be as good a year as 2021, which was the best since 2006. So again, you can start to see the numbers are starting to become quite affected by the inventory levels. And look at the list price to selling price ratio, average ratio, condos 100.1, overall 99.9. So we're seeing the majority of our sales at or very near or above the list price. And as Mark said, you got to caution the seller a little bit and say, not all neighborhoods do this. These are overall stats for Collier County for the entire month. So, you have to understand that we're still very much a neighborhood specific market. But again, look at listings down 23% from last year. And pendings starting to flatten out a little bit, but a lot more pendings than we put in sales. So we put these out to give you an idea and give your customers an idea of what's happening in the market. And the lower right there showing the decrease in overall sales from the same month last year is, I think it's telling. What do you think, Mark? Oh, wonderful. Are you still there?
I'm still here. I just had to get back to my microphone button.
Okay. No, you can see that we just looked at the full year of 2021, and now we're looking just 2021 over 2022 over 2021 for the month. And I was really kind of surprised to see the significance in the change in sales numbers.
So there's two things that come to mind. That one is probably evident, the other might not be so evident. One is if you get a listing, it's going to sell. Plus there's something terribly wrong with it. Maybe it backs up to I-75, or it's, the seller wants double what it's worth, or it's got smoke or pet odor on the inside. But if it's an average listing, it's going to sell. And what it doesn't tell you is how many people made offers that didn't get accepted and are still in the buyer pool out there. And so, again, listings reign. Get a listing and you're almost guaranteed to get a commission.
Correct. Yeah. And, one of the things that we did last year that we should probably repeat was, how to deal with multiple offers and how to make sure that you keep yourself and your seller informed of everything that's going on.
Yeah, I was thinking about that before we got on the call today. That's a good topic to bring up again.
Well, we can hit that here in a couple minutes. I've got a couple of good, I've got a good spreadsheet and I've got a good letter to send out to all of those agents whose offer didn't get accepted. We took some of the stuff that we got from James Shaw calls and, updated it a little bit for our market. So anyhow, we'll take a quick look at Lee. But you can start to see that we're starting to see some effects of the supply right away in January. So here in Lee, where we saw last year, year over year, pretty flat listings. Can everybody see that okay? Okay, good. We saw a pretty flat amount of listings coming into the system as going out of the system. Now we're starting to see that disparity hit up in Lee County. So we saw much less of an effect in terms of overall price increases and inventory levels in Lee last year, but now we're starting to see that impact, obviously, as people can't find properties. They're moving up to Lee County where there was more supply and prices were more favorable, but now that effect is starting to hit. Look at the days on market average, 20 days. So if somebody, someone calls and says, I'm really interested in buying a property around 300,000. You kind of got to think about that. It's like, I could send you properties, but if I send you half a dozen properties, chances are 4 of them are going to be gone before you can look at them and call me back and say, hey, I'm interested in that one. So it's almost like we have to change our strategy of working with buyers to say, hey, really, if you're serious about buying in this environment, you need to be here, and we need to narrow down your search, find a community, we're so community-based, that you like, and focus on that and be prepared to move quickly. Because the problem is, if you take a kind of a lackadaisical attitude, well, I want to look at this neighborhood and that neighborhood and that neighborhood, the picture is changing so fast that it's very difficult to, without a good focus, to deal with a buyer in today's market. Mark?
Yeah, I'm seeing something that I saw happen in 2004 and 2005, even 6 a little bit, is that buyers' expectations of what they can get for their budget don't match reality, especially in the lower end. And so you could spend hours and hours showing property, and then they ultimately decide that they can't afford what they want. They don't find it here, and then they move on to someplace else. So educating the buyer as much as you can before you start scheduling showings is probably advantageous. And then I've seen, for example, homes in Lehigh Acres that are probably going to more fit their budget. And there's some nice neighborhoods within Lehigh Acres. And so you may have to get out of your comfort zone a bit and travel a little more distance if you don't have any other clients that you're working with or any customers to get a deal done. If you say, I'm only going to work within a 5 or 10 mile radius of where I live or where I work, then your pipeline needs to have a lot of people coming into it, because a lot of those people cannot afford to be in that area.
No, it's an interesting market, and the problem is, obviously there's a ton more buyers than sellers. We're still putting 2,500 listings out into the market for the month, and even though that's less than a year ago, it's still a lot of listings. It's just a question of the demand hasn't waned, so you got multiple offers and you got more offers coming in for each property and more buyers that aren't coming through. So we're still seeing a lot of escalation clauses being used and a lot of, people, trying to maybe, I'm vehemently opposed to waiving inspections. You can certainly put into your contract that you're not going to ask for any repairs or credits, but to waive inspections is really a dangerous thing. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I'm also noticing the price jumps as it's reflected in your charts, that when you used to think of single family homes in places like the Park Shore and Moorings area, they were $1 million, maybe $2 million off the water. And now I'm seeing homes $7.5 million, a home in Royal Harbor for 16 million. So it is as much for those of us that have been in business for a while. It's about getting a reset on our mindset on what property values are in any given area. If you're not following MLS, and if you're only following it when you have a buyer, then you don't get a big picture or even a neighborhood snapshot if you're not studying those numbers a little closer. So I would advocate that people do auto emails to themselves, especially if they're doing a farm area or if they have a target market where they have a frequency of buyers. Let's say your farm area is not the same as where you're getting a lot of buyers for, then you need to get set up perhaps an auto email for your target geographic area. If I thought I was going to have a lot of people that wanted Naples Park as an example for Naples, then I would set up an auto email so that you get notifications when any activity takes place within Naples Park.
Yeah, you can, every time you have a listing or a farm area, you need to set up an MLS auto email. If you're not familiar with how to do that, we can certainly help you. It's a relatively easy thing to do, but you should get email and or text. You could get email notifications directly when anything changes in that neighborhood. And if you're working in that neighborhood, you really need to know what's going on. And if you're working with a buyer, boom, it comes up, you call the buyer and you can move right away. So I think that's a great idea. We're so community driven that, you really need to know the individual characteristics of each of the neighborhoods, especially if it's, and let's say it's in Pelican Bay, you've got all kinds of different neighborhoods in there with all kinds of different characteristics. So depending upon what your buyer's looking for, you really need to focus and make sure that your buyer understands what's going on in that neighborhood, and that you're going to, be the source of anything that changes. Yeah, Mark.
If you're using auto emails, be sure you put it on the ASAP notification. Because what I'm finding is if you simply wait and look at the hot sheet each morning for activity, your buyers, especially, and some sellers, are getting automatic emails from either Zillow or Realtor.com or another agent perhaps. And they know before you know that there's something new on the market, or there's been a price change, or there's a new listing.
Yeah, the whole idea of the MLS 8.0 was to avoid that situation where the customer finds it on Zillow before you see it in MLS. And that's, hopefully that's getting a little bit better. I'm not, So anyhow, let's stop the share. What else do we have today?
One more thing that comes up about the auto email is you could do an auto email for new construction in any price range or any area if you chose to. And whenever there's a new listing that comes up that's new construction, you'll get that notice, because a lot of buyers in our area want new construction and they're waiting for something to be released. And again, if you're not on top of that, they're off registering themselves online or in person at sales centers when those things hit the ground.
Yeah, you used to be, but builders were a lot more flexible. If your customers went there, a lot of times they'd call you and say, you know, hey, Mark, your customer, Mr. Jones is here and he's mentioning your name, or, you know, do you want to be included in the sale? And a lot of them have cut that out. If you don't appear with them, then you're not going to get credit for the sale. So it's really imperative that you build a good relationship with your customer so that they understand you can help them just as much with new construction as you can with a resale, in terms of the planning, in terms of looking at the options and really taking a look at site selection and those kinds of things. Those are where you can really be helpful to somebody that just walks in, and other than that, they get the sales pitch from the whoever's working the neighborhood. So that's a great point. You know, you really need to stay out front of new construction, know which developments your customer might be interested in based on what you're doing in the resale market, and really stay out ahead of that. And it doesn't hurt to go out to these places and advance register a customer that may or may not be interested, because if you're there and you register them, you got a chance of collecting a commission rather than, you know, and I think even some of the big tract builders are down, Lennar's down to 1%, aren't they, Mark? I think I read that.
Yeah, the last I checked. And that reminds me also is when you can also, when you get your auto email response, correct me if I'm wrong, you can also change the columns in the report in what comes in. If not, go in, do a search for an area, but put the list price to sale price ratio in a column, because that's going to be information that sellers and buyers expect you to know. Is, you know, if there's an anomaly, if something sold 10% above list price or something sold 10% below list price, you can also do a column original list price to sale price ratio. So somebody overpriced something by $500,000 and they lowered the price 12 times and it finally sold, and you can see what that original list price to sale price ratio is. So that's information, again, that sellers are going to especially know and buyers want to know.
Yeah, I think if you're working with a buyer in a neighborhood, you really need to know what's going on, what's the days on market, what's the average list price to sell price, and, you know, if there have been price reductions. Those are all things that the MLS report can tell you. It'll tell you if there's been a change and how much the change is. It'll tell you what the list to sell price is. It'll tell you what the days on market are, and also cumulative days on market. And those are all, you know, you need to be really the pressure on you to have that information and be able to use it to the betterment of your buyers is higher than it ever has been. I mean, it used to be you could, you know, you're really just looking and you kind of had a feel for the neighborhood. Now you really need to have those numbers, because you need to convince your buyer that unless they're willing to be competitive in that market, that, you know, you're wasting a lot of time and energy to put an offer in that's not anywhere near what the norm is for that neighborhood. So, all right, I'm going to shift gears with you a little bit here. And I did a recording for the legal Q&A on insurance, and it's just a short recording. It's only 8 minutes long, but I'd like to play that for you. I think it's getting released this week. So I need to make sure I can share that.
Is that a local thing or a Florida Realtors?
It's a NABOR thing, but it basically talks about what's happening in the homeowners and flood insurance market. It has some information in there that I got from attending Florida Realtors, but it's just a good general information thing for when you're working with your customers. So let's see if I can be successful in playing it. Play this here. Share it. Is that working? Can you hear it? You can hear it?
Hi, I'm Eugene, NABOR member, and I'm here
You
with
can hear
Jeff
the
Jones,
audio okay?
2019 president
Thank
of
you.
NABOR. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, good morning. We're here to talk about insurance this morning, and I'm been studying that for many years, was on the NAR Insurance Committee, and I'm currently vice chair of the Insurance Breakout Group at Florida Realtors, fresh from a meeting last week where we got a lot more information. So I'm happy to be here and happy to try to answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Jeff. So can you tell us about what's happening in the homeowners insurance market right now? I've heard that there are big rate changes happening.
Yes, that's accurate. The homeowners insurance market in Florida is currently in a pretty much of a state of turmoil. All of the new roofs that have been paid for, plus many of the attorney's fees that have resulted from these lawsuits, have driven the cost of insurance in Florida up. Insurance in Florida is very difficult because there are no major carriers that write insurance for the most part in Florida. It's all small carriers and then Citizens, which is the state-run insurer of last resort. So what's happened with all of these lawsuits, just to give you an idea, we are 8% of all the claims paid in the United States and 77% of all the lawsuits. Wow. So the legal costs and the frequent replacement of the roofs have driven the rates up. Many of the smaller companies are up 20 to 30%. Citizens can only raise their rate 10%. So we've seen Citizens go from around 400,000 policies last year to over 800,000 this year because they are absorbing a lot of the insureds that can't get a good rate from their current carrier. So as a result, rates are up. They're going to continue to go up, and many of the insurance companies in Florida are losing money, and some may even have to go out of business. So it's a very sensitive time for homeowners insurance in Florida.
Wow, thank you. There's a lot of talk about flood insurance rates going up as well. That happening this spring. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, back in 2015, we started when I was on the NAR Insurance Committee trying to figure out a way to reform FEMA, which currently I think is several $1 billion in debt because they don't collect enough money from their policyholders to cover the payouts. So there was a great amount of effort put into reforming flood insurance, and we had a great individual to work with who came in as head of FEMA around that time. So as of November of 2021, Risk Rating 2.0, which is the newly revised FEMA, was released, and all of the new policies coming after April 1st will have what we call the Risk Rating 2.0 format. So what's different? The original concept of FEMA was because none of the insurance carriers would write flood insurance. So FEMA was formed, and they really had very little data to start with. So the rates that were assigned to these various homes were really pretty much inaccurate. Some people were paying a lot, some people were paying a little. Was based on some very rudimentary mapping. And over the years, basically I could be living in a home that is ground level and you could be 12 feet off the ground and we both pay in the same thing. Okay, so a lot of things were what we call grandfathered in because there wasn't map data for them. So needless to say, Florida was paying in $4 for every dollar of claim we got back because we have the burden of 40% of all the flood policies in the US. So something had to be done. So we brought in, basically they brought in a modeling company that does disaster modeling, just like the insurance carriers do when they figure out their rates. We were able to get money from the state to map every property in the state with what's called LIDAR mapping or laser mapping. So now we can tell exactly to the dwelling level what the characteristics of that dwelling are. And as a result, new rates were established. For the most part, probably, I'll put a slide up here in a few minutes, but about 88% of the Florida policies will see no increase or a very modest increase. And there'll be a small number on the end that have not been rated properly in the past that will see a rate increase. Two other important points here. Number one, the maximum flood insurance premium under Risk Rating 2.0 is $12,000 a year. which may be a lot, but it used to be $46,000 a year. So hopefully with the rates will be more realistic, they'll spread out, and everyone will really have a fair system. You no longer need an elevation certificate to get a rate quote. You can call your insurance company. And one last thing, you can assume the policy of an existing homeowner when you're purchasing a home. So it's very important to be able to get that information. You can get a much lower rate that way if the new rating is higher. The second thing is if you do get quoted a higher rate, there's a glide path of 18% per year. So you're not paying the big jump all at once. You'll pay it over five or 6 years. So hopefully a fairer system, much more equitable in Florida. There'll be a few people that have been paying less than their fair share that will experience some difficulty in the rates, but overall, it's a much fairer, more balanced system, similar to many of the major insurance carriers.
Okay, great. So, as a realtor, I get a lot of information. And I sometimes wonder, what's the right way to share that information with my customers? How do you recommend we share some of that information?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, we really need to start thinking about the I word, insurance, before we're going to be serious about making an offer on a property. And as a seller, you need to be helpful, provide your insurance information, provide your carrier information, and try to make as smooth a transition as possible from seller to buyer. So as long as you're willing to do a little bit of advanced research so that there's no shock when someone gets into a contract and finds out what their insurance rate will be, I think that's really going to help. The realtors can help their customers a great deal by looking out in advance, maybe doing some advanced research, and definitely considering the cost of insurance in the overall ownership of the home.
That's fantastic. What information do you recommend that we share with our customers before they even make an offer in this market?
Moving, kind of tagging on to what we just said, I think you have to share the fact that, we're looking at the total cost of ownership, which oftentimes is a mortgage, oftentimes is what the fees in the community are. But another factor that we really haven't considered as much is insurance. What is it going to cost you to insure your home at the level that you need it, and what is flood insurance going to cost? And we can now readily get that information in a couple of days. And then it's also important for the buyers to understand they can assume the policies of their homeowners if those are better rates than they're experiencing today. So overall, do the advanced research and include insurance in the research you're doing when you're going to make an offer.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. That's some great information. We just got some great information. Hope that this was helpful to you guys. And thank you, Jeff.
Okay,
That was good.
I don't know what you thought of that. That's our, we're doing these legal Q&A videos on various topics. And that's one of our first attempts, but
Yeah, I thought it was excellent.
I think that another thing, Mark, to tack on to your suggestion there, if you're working in an area, your buyer's working in an area, we have some excellent insurance contacts. You could call and say, hey, my customer's looking at 123 Main Street. Can you give me an idea what the insurance is going to be? Assuming I'm not going to keep the same policy as, so even if you just have some general information, the insurance agent can now go to that house, look it up, and give you a flood quote and a homeowner's insurance quote to give you an idea of what you're talking about. Obviously, with homeowners insurance, deductibles, coverage limits, that sort of thing can change the picture. But, it really is something that, at least the way we stand now, unless you're on an as-is contract, you get into a contract and you find out the insurance is substantially more, adds substantially more to your cost of ownership than your buyer was expecting. It's a difficult time, and there's a number of insurance carriers going out of business. Citizens, which is our insurer of last resort, is up from 400,000 policies a couple of years ago to now they're expected to go over 1 million shortly this year. And Citizens is great because it's an insurer of last resort, generally not quite as pricey as some of the other carriers, but the coverage isn't as good. So it's a insurer of last resort. And of course, the other thing is there are private flood markets in Florida now for the first time in the last 3 or 4 years, and sometimes they can be used. But your insurance agent now has a lot more information readily available. It used to take quite a bit of time to get a flood quote. The system was complicated. It was an out-of-date computer system, and you could call 3 insurance and get 3 different quotes. So now it's much more organized. It's much more risk-based. And let me say one other thing to share with your customers. Flood insurance is going to go up probably an average of 6 to 8% per year for the next few years until we hit what's called actuarial. There's never been an actuarial system in FEMA and flood insurance because it was a government system that was put in when the major carriers weren't writing any flood insurance. So you take a look at all those people out in Houston that had that supernatural flooding from the hurricane. Most of those people got a check from the government for $5,000. Those that had flood insurance got $250,000 plus their contents. There's a big difference if you're starting your life over after your house has been completely flooded between those two numbers. So, it can happen here. We've had seasons since I've been here where we had 3 or 4 hurricanes, and they don't all hit Naples, but they do go up through the center of the state and up through the north part of Lee County, and they do quite a bit of damage. So it's important that we look at insurance. I've kind of got, I don't know how I got the handle for this, but I've been working on the insurance committees and stuff since probably for 10 years. So.
Can you talk about condominiums and what buyers' need is for flood insurance?
Yeah, the flood insurance, there's some strange configurations out there. I worked on a villa this summer that was organized as a condominium, but each person had to get their own flood insurance. So it's kind of spread out over that, and the flood policy for the condominium has to be sufficient enough to meet the lender's standards. And some of the older flood insurance policies, the condos didn't fully insure. And I actually had a case where somebody on the 9th floor of a condo on Marco had to buy a separate flood policy because they didn't have enough underlying coverage in the condo. So it's a little strange. I think that the whole condo lending process is going to be under quite a bit of strain because of this new requirement for reserves and for information. If it's going to be what they call a QM, or sell to Fannie or Freddie, there's going to have to be a lot of more information provided to them. Now obviously the pendulum process swings too far, but the state of the condo association for that building down in Miami was deplorable. There was millions of dollars of deferred maintenance. The home condo owners had turned down 6 or 7 assessments, and eventually that all caught up. And so now you see bills in the legislature this year, and insurance, or not insurance, but Fannie and Freddie reacting to trying to get more information and protect us from ourselves there.
So when it comes to, you gave the example, the 9th floor needing flood insurance, additional coverage, is at what point would the buyer who's paying cash have any right to terminate the contract if they found out insurance was high?
None. And that's one of the things we're looking at in the NABOR contract revisions this year. In the FAR bar, there is a flood insurance get out of Dodge thing where if the flood insurance is much higher. The wording is a little bit, that's where we get into trouble, is what is the wording? The wording in the FAR amendment is that it's substantially more than what it was, and that the buyers, affected financially by it. That does give them a chance, if they include that rider, to cancel. So, if we don't do something with an insurance addendum, we're probably going to end up with more and more people just writing as-is contracts. But even if you write an as-is contract, you still have to have the information about what the insurance is going to be. And most people aren't doing that research soon enough. So you get out of your due diligence period, and then you find out that the insurance is astronomical. That's not a good situation for your buyer, and whether it's an as-is or a regular contract. So I think we're going to have to figure something out. In the meantime, we're trying to get out front as much as we can to people and say, hey, find this information out sooner than later for your buyer.
That would be nice to have something like a white paper that you could, like, almost like the energy brochure that we used to give out,
Yep.
or the condominium not frequent. Yeah, I guess it's the condominium handbook or whatever that one was called. Something again to address, these are things that buyers should be aware of before executing a contract.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that we're going to do something with the insurance, because it is becoming a huge factor, and so we're probably going to need to do something with that. So if you want, we can shift gears here a little bit. I've got let's see if I can open this multiple offer worksheet and a letter that we put together that allows that you can send to all of the people that didn't get accepted. All right, let's close that. All right, there's that one.
While you're pulling that up, let's include a conversation about highest price is not necessarily forcing the seller to accept the highest offer.
Yeah, that's correct. The seller does not have to accept any offer. I think that's one of the things that maybe people don't realize that the seller is in the driver's seat for any sale, and the seller can accept no offers. He could get an offer that's 25% over the list price and say, I don't want to accept that. And so the seller can decide. The seller can also accept the lowest offer he has because he likes the terms, or he likes the situation. Maybe they're giving him a 3 or 4 month post occupancy addendum. And so what we did this spreadsheet for was, these are all the parameters that are coming in on these offers. And, again, I always recommend you call the listing agent before you submit an offer and ask the listing agent some questions. Do you have other offers? Can you share with me if the offers are over list price? Can you share with me if you have both sides of any of the offers? Try to get as much information as you can, because if you've got a buyer and the buyer says, well, it's on the market for $575 and I think it's worth $525. So let's put an offer in for $525. And all of a sudden you call the listing agent says, hey, thanks for your call. I got 8 other offers and 6 of them are over list. So you got to go back to your buyer with a dose of reality and say, I'd love to put an offer in for $525, but here's the landscape. What would you like to do? And also, I think, depending upon the circumstances, escalation clauses can be useful. We have one that's Keller Williams approved that I worked with Sam Saad on. And we also have one that we put together for Nabor, which is much more simplistic. And then Farbar has one. So, but know how to use it and understand that if there's not much of a delta between what the buyer's maximum that they're going to pay and what they're going to offer, that the escalation clause probably doesn't mean very much. Also know that a seller does not have to accept an escalation clause. They can say, I'm going to counter with your max, or I'm not going to accept your escalation clause. So it's still a pretty much of the, a jungle out there with multiple offers. And let me put up this worksheet that we worked on this summer. If I can find it. Where is it? Here, let me go here. Oh, let me go here. Share the screen. Okay, all right, good. Can you see that okay? Yes? You see the Excel?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, this is just an idea that I got this, I think, a while back and started playing with it a little bit. And see if I can draw down the. Okay, anyhow, what we tried to do was to take and create and you're welcome to this, I'll be glad to send it to you if you like. What we tried to do is create a way to compare apples to apples. And here you can see we have 9 offers in the process of negotiating. 2 of them were withdrawn. They either found something else or they decided that they didn't want to be involved in the bidding anymore. But you can see that we start out with the buyer's name and the agent's name, the contract type, what's their initial offer, if they have an escalation clause, what's the maxed offer, what's their earnest money, any seller concessions, you don't see those 2 mentioned anymore. What's the down payment? What's the loan amount? Or if it's cash, what's the loan type? Do we receive a lender letter with either proof of funds or pre-approval letter? What's the inspection criteria? Is there an appraisal contingency? So the loan objection means when is the financing contingency period up? And the loan must be either confirmed or the seller can cancel. What's the closing date? Do they want any type of post-closing occupancy? When do we need to get back to these people? And are there any other deadlines that that you're going to set by a highest and best? Is there a home sale contingency? If so, is the home under contract and when is it closing? Other considerations that we put in there. Will the buyer occupy? Many times in this particular case, there was a restriction that the buyer had to live there for a year before they could rent it. So in this particular case, if the buyer said they, wanted to rent it out, that's the reason you see all Ys. Those offers fell through right away because they were investors. So if there's HOA transfer fees, who's paying them? Are there any other seller expenses? And is the seller paying closing costs? Again, this is a spreadsheet. You can put anything else in there you want, but over a few iterations, I think we came up with a pretty complete list of every characteristic and what is the seller's net. What do you think?
How do we access it?
Pardon?
How do we access it or get it?
I'll send it to you. Just
Maybe you could share it in the files section of the Facebook or in the Market Center intranet so we can find it again later on.
I could do that for sure. This is just, again, it's not it's one that we were working with a number of different spreadsheets, and we kind of changed it and adapted it to our market. And again, it's a spreadsheet, so you can add lines to it or take lines off as you see fit. But, you know, working with a buyer on this and updating it as the offers are coming in, they got a pretty good picture of what the bottom line is, and what offers that, you know, they believe will. And then, of course, we had a winning contract, which was the best out of all of them. So there you go. There's another, probably something that might be kind of good to share. And that is, this is a letter that got started, I think, with James Shaw. So we'll share that. There it is. Can you see that? Yes? I can't see you with your thumbs up. You see it?
Yeah, I
okay?
can see it.
Okay, good. All right, so I think this started out as a James Shaw thing. A couple people called in, went through various iterations. I took one from his, I think, James Shaw library and kind of did my thing here. But you can put this in your own words. It's a Word document. But to me, you know, when with 10 or 12 offers total, we sent these out. And, you know, there was a couple agents in there that were pretty experienced and pretty, like, you know, demanding about when we're going to make a decision and what we can expect and all that. And they gave me some feedback here that said, hey, that was really nice of you to send that letter. And what was the reason is not only that you're thanking them for their professionalism, but they also have something to go back to their buyer with and say, hey, you know, there were 7 offers here above the list price. 4 had escalation clauses, 2 had waived appraisal contingencies, and no one waived inspection contingencies. So that's an interesting letter. And, you know, whenever people have used it, modified, of course, to their own words, whatever feels comfortable with them, but you definitely send it out. And I always like to say, have your seller sign the last page of the offer saying that I am not accepting your offer, and send that back with this so that you have proof that you presented the offer and you have information you want to share with the buyer's agent whose offer didn't get accepted, that maybe they can go back with their buyer and say, you know, here's some of the things that we learned from this particular transaction. So, any comments? Okay. Again, I can put this out in the Facebook library and I can send it to you individually if you like for your use in Word and Excel format.
Thank you.
So let's see, there's one other thing that I'd like to bring up here. Let's see if I can find it real quick. There we go. Let's see if we can get that up there. All right, now I gotta figure out how to get it up there. I'm shared challenged here. Let's see, hold on. Back here. Let's see. Here. So we need, here. Let's see. Trying to figure out why I can't share this notice, but let's see. There it is. All right, can everybody, let's do this back to the page level. You see that okay? Buyer notice? Okay. I feel very strongly that a buyer waiving inspections to make their offer look better is really a bad move for the buyer. And it tremendous increase in the liability toward the brokerage and toward you as an agent and toward your relationship with the customer when they buy something. So what you can do if you're in an as-is contract, you could certainly write in the clause that says buyer will not make any request for repairs or ask for any credits. So at least I want to inspect it and I want to find out if there's anything in that home that I don't know about that the inspector might find or question that could cause me some problems. And my best example is a builder who bought a condo, walked through it. It was pretty nicely remodeled, but it had an air conditioning problem, and they didn't inspect it. And they found out later that the air conditioning service people were searching for a leak, but didn't come to any conclusion. He didn't try to raise any issues because he'd waived inspections. And then he moved in and found that there was a leak up above the ceiling there with the piping, and was full of mold. So he called and said, you know, what are you going to do about it? And what's the seller going to do about it? And what's the buyer's agent going to do about it? And what's the listing agent going to do about it? And I'm like, well, you waived inspections. Well, I wouldn't have caught it anyhow. Well, yes, you would have. You would have called the air conditioning service company and said, what's going on with the leak? So we developed this notice that basically when I see a contract in compliance now with 0 inspection days where you're representing the buyer, I'm going to send you this note and say you need to have the buyer sign this. So real briefly, you know, we're recommending that you have inspections, and here's what inspections can do. Accordingly, buyers agree to hold Keller Williams Realty and their agent harmless from any liability or damages. So hopefully you're having this conversation. Now, if it's a tear down, okay. But most of the time the buyer's like, oh, this place looks great. I want my offer to be stronger. Just waive the inspections. Well, consider paragraph 2. If you waive inspections, the only time you can go into the premises is on the walkthrough inspection, which is the day of or day before closing. So there's a thing in the contract called seller's maintenance obligation. And that says that the seller is obligated, whether it's an as-is or a regular contract, to maintain the property in the condition it was in when you saw it. So how are you going to determine at the walkthrough if something's not right, whether it was not right when you last saw it, or whether it was something that occurred after the effective date of the contract? So you waiving your inspection rights also waives your access rights. And it's really important to say, look, if this is a problem, you know, we can hook you up with an attorney to discuss it. but we really don't think you should do that. And the third paragraph in this agreement is a lot of people now are saying, well, I'm going in cash because the last 2 or 3 times I went in with financing and I lost out to cash offers. Fine. But Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, are you able to close on this property without financing? I mean, I understand, you have the cash and you could close if you wanted to, get a loan afterwards, or if your loan comes through after the closing date, will that be okay? And if they go, no, we couldn't buy this place without the loan, then you're saying to them, if you go in cash and you don't close, a lot of times, oh, I'll use my lender at home, I got a friend, and now you're in a situation where they're on cash terms and they can't really get out, and if the seller's not willing to extend the closing date to accommodate the financing, which is sometimes happens, that the buyer could lose their deposit. So a lot of risk out there right now because of the strong competition for buying listings. But, I just encourage you, and I try at every juncture to say, hey, don't let your buyer not inspect a place just because of expediency, or they want to let their make their offer more attractive to the seller. And that's my spiel. I just think it's really, we're in difficult times. We're in waters we probably haven't been in for a long time. And so I think we need to make sure we do a good job of explaining to our customers what their risk is. And if they decide to jump in the pool without knowing how deep it is, then sign here, please. All right, it's 2:58, so we're going to 3 o'clock. So if there's any final comments or anything you'd like to wrap up with, now's the time to do that. Mark, you got anything else you'd like to?
Oh, good session. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this is the broker's update section. The next one's a contract class, but glad you were able to go through some of these things, and I hope I added some value to your day and to your experience. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff, and I'm going to send you that email requesting those copies right away.
Be sure you stop the recording so it saves.
Yeah, good idea.
Anyway, thank you.
Good deal. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you.